My name is Virginia Thompson, and I'm 67 years old. I spent decades believing my role as a mother and wife was enough until my son James made it clear he thought otherwise. At a family dinner celebrating his promotion, he looked me in the eye and told me I had done nothing with my life. What he didn't know was that his new CEO and I shared a history that would soon turn his world upside down. Before I tell you what happened after my own son told me I've done nothing with my life, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had your worth questioned by someone who should have known better. I wasn't always just a mother and wife. Back in the late 70s, I graduated from Cornell University with a double major in business administration and economics, finishing in the top 5% of my class. I was one of only 37 women in a program of over 200 students. In those days, women had to work twice as hard to get half the recognition, but I was determined to carve my place in the corporate world. After Cornell, I was accepted into Wharton for my MBA. Again, I was significantly outnumbered, but I thrived on the challenge. I graduated with honors in 1982 and was immediately recruited by Peterson and Wallace, one of the top consulting firms at that time. The firm was actively trying to diversify, though their idea of diversity back then simply meant hiring a few qualified women. My first years at Peterson and Wallace were exhilarating and exhausting. 60-hour work weeks were standard. I traveled constantly, lived out of hotel rooms, and built a reputation as someone who could handle difficult clients and complex problems. By my third year, I was managing projects for Fortune 500 companies, creating organizational efficiency models that saved millions of dollars. It was during a major restructuring project for Allied Financial that I met Frank, my husband. He was their rising star in the investment division, brilliant with numbers and strategic thinking. Unlike many men of that era, Frank respected my intelligence and career ambition. We dated for 2 years while maintaining our demanding careers and married in 1987. For the next 5 years, we were the definition of a power couple. I was promoted to senior consultant, handling some of the firm's most prestigious accounts. Frank rose to vice president at Allied Financial. We bought our first home, a beautiful colonial in Connecticut, though we barely had time to enjoy it between our travel schedules. In 1992, we decided to start a family. I was 34 and aware of the ticking biological clock. We thought I could have a child and return to my career path after maternity leave. Many women were beginning to do this, though it certainly wasn't easy or widely accepted yet. Pregnancy changed everything. Severe complications developed in my second trimester. My doctor ordered complete bed rest for the remainder of my pregnancy. Peterson and Wallace held my position for 3 months, but eventually I had to make a choice. I resigned from my position to focus on bringing our son safely into the world. James was born in 1993, after a difficult delivery that required an emergency cesarean section. He was healthy but small, and needed extra attention during his first year. What I had planned as a temporary pause in my career began stretching longer. Frank's career was soaring, and his income alone was more than sufficient for our family. When James was 2, Frank received an incredible opportunity to head Allied's new international division. The catch was that we would need to relocate to London for 3 years. We discussed my returning to consulting, but the logistics of 2 high-powered careers, plus international moves with a toddler, seemed impossible. We decided that for this season of life, I would focus on our family while Frank pursued his career advancement. Those 3 years in London turned into 5, followed by 2 years in Singapore, then back to the United States, but with frequent relocations, as Frank continued climbing the corporate ladder. Each move meant establishing new homes, finding new schools for James, building new social networks, and navigating new communities. During these years, I wasn't idle. I served on hospital boards, created literacy programs for underprivileged children, chaired major fundraising campaigns, and managed substantial charitable foundations. I used my business skills to increase efficiency and results in nonprofit settings. One of my proudest achievements was developing a community outreach program that became a national model for hospital systems. But to James, growing up, I was just Mom. He never saw me in a corporate setting. He never witnessed me leading boardroom discussions or closing major deals. When he talked about successful people, he mentioned his father and other business leaders, never including me in that category. I tried occasionally to tell James stories about my earlier career, but he showed little interest. Like many children, he couldn't imagine his mother as anything other than the role she played in his life. I told myself this was natural, and that someday he would see me as a whole person with a life and identity beyond motherhood. By the time James entered college, Frank had settled into a permanent executive position with Goldman Sachs in New York. I had built a substantial network of community connections and was serving as board chair for 3 major nonprofit organizations. I was using all my business skills, just in different settings than before. James graduated from Princeton with a business degree and landed a job at Synerg Tech, a rapidly growing technology firm. He was ambitious and driven, reminding me of myself at his age. Over the next 7 years, he rose quickly through the ranks, eventually becoming vice president of operations before his 30th birthday. Frank and I were immensely proud of him. We had provided him with every opportunity, supported his education, and connected him with valuable networks through Frank's business associates. I had coached him through interview preparations, edited his resumes, and listened to his practice presentations. I thought he recognized and appreciated our contributions to his success. Last month, James called to share exciting news. He had been promoted again now, overseeing global operations for Synerg Tech's expanding European division. He suggested we have a family dinner to celebrate, and mentioned he wanted to introduce us to Allison, a woman he had been dating for several months who worked in Synerg Tech's marketing department. I was thrilled at the prospect of meeting someone special in James's life and celebrating his success. I spent 2 days preparing his favorite meal, beef Wellington, with truffle mashed potatoes and haricot verts, followed by the chocolate soufflé he had loved since childhood. I wanted everything to be perfect for this important family occasion. Little did I know that this dinner would become a turning point in our relationship, forcing both of us to reevaluate everything we thought we knew about each other. The evening of our celebration dinner arrived, and I had transformed our dining room into a festive space worthy of the occasion. Crystal glasses sparkled under the chandelier. Light fine china that had been my mother's graced. The table and fresh flowers provided a colorful centerpiece. The aroma of beef Wellington filled the house, and Frank had selected a special bottle of Cabernet from our wine collection. At precisely 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I smoothed my dress and took a deep breath, eager to meet this woman who had captured my son's attention. Frank opened the door, and there stood James, looking polished in a tailored suit with a striking woman beside him. Allison was tall and elegant, with intelligent eyes and a warm smile. She handed me a beautiful orchid plant and thanked us for the invitation. "Mom, Dad, this is Allison Weber," James said, his hand resting proudly on her back. "She's Synerg Tech's Director of Global Marketing." Frank welcomed them with hugs and handshakes, then poured champagne for a toast. "To James and his tremendous accomplishments," he said, raising his glass. "And to new beginnings and new friends. We're so delighted to meet you, Allison." The first hour was pleasant. Over appetizers, we learned that Allison had graduated from Yale, worked for several major corporations, and joined SynergTech 3 years ago. She spoke enthusiastically about the company's innovative approach and global expansion plans. We're pushing into 6 new European markets next quarter. James explained clearly in his element, discussing business strategy. The operational challenges are significant, but the growth potential is enormous. The board just approved additional funding for the expansion Allison added. They're also looking to diversify the board itself, bringing in more members with varied backgrounds, especially people with community organization experience, since corporate social responsibility is becoming more central to our brand. I perked up at this. That's a wise approach. When I served on Memorial Hospital's governance board, we found that diverse perspectives significantly improved our decision-making processes. James gave me a quick sideways glance, but continued discussing the company's plans. As I served the main course, the conversation shifted to workplace challenges. Allison mentioned a recent crisis when a product launch had technical difficulties. The engineering team worked miracles to fix the problems, James said, but the real challenge was managing customer expectations during the delay. I nodded in understanding. Crisis management is always about transparent communication. When our community experienced severe flooding 3 years ago, I coordinated between 15 different agencies and hundreds of volunteers. The key was creating clear information channels and making sure everyone felt heard while still maintaining decisive leadership. James set down his fork with a sharp clink against the plate. "Mom, please, what would you know about executive decisions? You've been just a housewife. You've done nothing in life." The room fell silent. Frank's face reddened instantly, and Allison's eyes widened in shock. I sat perfectly still, the words hitting me like physical blows. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. James Frank's voice was sharp with anger. "Apologize to your mother immediately." James shrugged, seemingly oblivious to the damage his words had caused. "I'm just saying, discussing corporate strategy with someone who's never worked in that environment isn't particularly helpful." "I'm sorry," Allison murmured, clearly mortified by his behavior. "I found Virginia's perspective quite insightful, actually." I carefully placed my napkin beside my plate and looked directly at my son. "I understand you're proud of your achievements, James. You should be, but perhaps there's more to my life than you've bothered to notice." "Mom, I didn't mean." He trailed off, not quite apologizing, but sensing he'd crossed a line. "Let's enjoy this wonderful meal," Virginia prepared. Frank interjected, his voice tight with controlled anger. "We can discuss business another time." The remainder of dinner progressed in awkward fits and starts. Allison made valiant efforts to restore pleasant conversation, asking about family photos on the wall and commenting enthusiastically on the delicious food. James became unusually quiet, occasionally checking his phone for messages. Frank maintained a rigid politeness that barely concealed his anger. When I brought out the chocolate soufflé, James briefly emerged from his self-absorption. "You made my favorite," he said, with a glimmer of the little boy I remembered. "Of course I did," I replied, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. They left shortly after dessert, James citing an early meeting the next day. Allison thanked me profusely for the wonderful meal and lovely evening, her eyes conveying an apology her words couldn't directly express. After closing the door behind them, Frank turned to me. "Virginia, I am so sorry for his behavior. I've never been so disappointed in him." "It's all right," I said automatically, though we both knew it wasn't. "No, it's not all right. He had no right to speak to you that way. He has no idea what you gave up for this family." I began clearing the table, needing physical activity to process my emotions. Apparently, he thinks I've done nothing of value with my life. Frank helped me load the dishwasher in silence. When we finished, he pulled me into a tight embrace. "You are the most capable, intelligent, remarkable woman I've ever known." Don't let his thoughtless words make you question your worth for even a moment. I nodded against his shoulder, grateful for his support, but unable to shake the pain. After Frank went upstairs, I sat alone at the kitchen table, tears finally breaking free. Decades of choices, sacrifices, and accomplishments, reduced to nothing by my own son. The word echoed in my mind, hollow and cold. I had always believed James respected me, even if he didn't fully understand my life choices. Now I wondered if he had been silently judging me all along, measuring my worth by titles and salaries rather than character and contribution. That night, sleep eluded me entirely. I lay awake replaying the dinner conversation, wondering where I had gone wrong in showing my son what truly matters in life. The worst part wasn't his dismissal of my contributions. It was realizing he had never really seen me at all. Morning light filtered through the bedroom curtains, finding me still awake, eyes gritty from unshed tears. Frank had left early for a breakfast meeting after kissing my forehead and whispering words of encouragement. I appreciated his support, but this was something I needed to process alone. I made coffee and carried the steaming mug to our home office. Sitting at the desk, I stared at family photos arranged on the bookshelf. James's graduation, our family trip to Yellowstone, his first day at Princeton. So many memories of a life built around nurturing him, supporting his dreams, creating a foundation for his success. Had it all been a mistake? Should I have maintained my career regardless of the challenges? Would James have respected me more if I'd chosen differently? These questions circled my mind like relentless birds of prey. Finally, unable to bear my own thoughts any longer, I decided to visit the attic where boxes of memorabilia from our many moves were stored. Perhaps reconnecting with my past would help me make sense of my present. The pull-down ladder creaked as I climbed into the musty space. Sunlight streamed through a small window, illuminating dancing dust particles. I located the boxes marked Virginia Personal and began opening them one by one. In the third box beneath layers of tissue paper, I found a leather portfolio I hadn't seen in years. Inside were certificates, awards, and letters from my professional life. Distinguished Graduate Award from Wharton. Peterson and Wallace Consultant of the Year, 1985. Letter of Commendation from the CEO of Westinghouse, following a successful restructuring project. I ran my fingers over the embossed certificates, memories flooding back. The exhilaration of closing a difficult deal. The satisfaction of seeing my recommendations implemented with successful results. The respect in clients' eyes when I solved problems others couldn't. At the bottom of the portfolio, a cream-colored envelope caught my attention. The paper had yellowed slightly with age, but the handwriting on the front remained clear. To whom it may concern regarding Virginia Thompson. I opened it and began reading. I am writing to offer my highest recommendation for Virginia Thompson, who served as my mentor during my internship at Peterson and Wallace in 1991. Virginia exemplifies every quality of exceptional leadership, brilliant analytical skills, clear communication, uncompromising integrity, and the ability to inspire excellence in others. Any organization would be fortunate to benefit from her remarkable talents and insights. The letter continued for 2 pages, extolling my professional virtues in glowing terms. It was signed Catherine Wilson, Summer Associate. Catherine Wilson. The name tugged at my memory. I reached for my laptop and searched her name, along with Synerge Tech. Immediately dozens of results appeared. Catherine Wilson, CEO of Synergtech for the past 3 years previously, Chief Operating Officer. Articles described her as a visionary leader transforming the company into a global powerhouse. I sat back, stunned. The young intern I had mentored 3 decades ago now ran the company where my son worked, the company whose board was seeking members with community organization experience, according to Allison. My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. James's name appeared on the screen. I took a deep breath before answering. "Hello, James." "Hi, Mom." His voice sounded casual, as if last night's dinner had been perfectly normal. "Just checking in. You're not being dramatic about last night, are you?" I was tired from work and didn't phrase things well. "Not an apology. Not even close." "I'm fine, James," I replied, my voice steady. "Just doing some organizing." "Good. Look, I've got to run to a meeting. Talk soon." The call ended abruptly. I stared at the phone, then back at Catherine's letter, then at the array of professional accomplishments spread before me. A plan began forming in my mind, tentative at first, then gaining clarity and purpose. I spent the next hour crafting an updated resume, my early career at Peterson and Wallace, including major projects and quantifiable results. My extensive board experience with nonprofit organizations, highlighting leadership roles and measurable outcomes. My community initiative work, including the disaster response program that had become a national model. Looking at the completed document, I felt a surge of pride. On paper, I was exactly the kind of candidate Synergtech's board might be seeking, someone with both corporate and community experience, someone who understood organizational systems from multiple perspectives. I opened my email and composed a message to Catherine Wilson. I kept it professional and straightforward, not mentioning James or our connection through him. I reminded her of our past association, attached my resume, and expressed interest in learning more about Synergtech's board expansion, citing my relevant experience in both corporate and community leadership. My finger hovered over the send button. Was I being petty? Was this about teaching James a lesson? Or was there something more meaningful at stake? Both, I realized. This was about reclaiming my narrative, about refusing to accept my son's dismissive view of my life's work. But it was also about potentially contributing value to an organization that could benefit from my unique perspective. I clicked send. Within 20 minutes, a response appeared in my inbox. Catherine remembered me clearly and enthusiastically. She expressed delight at the possibility of reconnecting and suggested a meeting the very next morning at Synergtech headquarters. I replied, confirming the appointment, then sat back, heart racing, with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. Should I tell James? It seemed only fair to warn him that I would be visiting his workplace to discuss a potential board position with his CEO. But then I remembered his words. "You've been just a housewife. You've done nothing in life." No, I decided. Some lessons are best learned through experience rather than warning. James had made assumptions about my capabilities and contributions. Perhaps it was time those assumptions were challenged directly. I spent the rest of the day reviewing Synergtech's recent annual reports, familiarizing myself with their strategic initiatives and corporate structure. I read articles about Catherine's leadership and the company's rapid growth under her guidance. I prepared thoughtful questions and identified specific ways my experience might benefit their board. That evening, I told Frank about my meeting. His face lit up with a mixture of pride and satisfaction. "It's about time," he said simply. "The world has been missing out on Virginia Thompson for too long." I slept soundly that night, anticipation replacing the hurt that had kept me awake the night before. Whatever happened at tomorrow's meeting, I had already taken back something precious: my belief in my own worth beyond the roles of mother and wife. The next morning, I stood before my closet contemplating what to wear for my meeting with Catherine Wilson. In the back, behind everyday clothes, hung garment bags containing business attire from another life. I unzipped one to find a navy blue suit I'd purchased for an important client presentation just before leaving Peterson and Wallace. Miraculously, it still fit, though, a bit more snugly than before. I paired the suit with a silk blouse and pearl earrings that had been a gift from Frank on our 20th anniversary. Looking in the mirror, I saw glimpses of the young consultant who had commanded boardrooms and client meetings decades ago. Beneath new lines and gray streaks, that woman still existed, her confidence and competence intact. Frank whistled appreciatively when I came downstairs. "Synerg Tech won't know what hit them," he said, pouring coffee into a travel mug for me. "Good luck today, though I doubt you'll need it." The drive to Synerg Tech's headquarters took 45 minutes. The imposing glass and steel building rose 20 stories above the surrounding landscape. Its modern architecture, a physical manifestation of the company's innovative reputation. I parked in the visitor section, checked my appearance one final time in the rearview mirror, and walked toward the entrance with deliberate, confident steps. The security guard at reception looked up as I approached. "Can I help you, ma'am?" His tone was polite, but held a hint of the condescension often directed toward older women. "I have a 9:30 appointment with Catherine Wilson," I replied, my voice clear and professional. His eyebrows rose slightly as he checked the schedule on his computer. "Your name, please." "Virginia Thompson." He nodded, suddenly more attentive. "Yes, Miss Thompson. Miss Wilson has you on her calendar. Please sign here and take this visitor badge. The elevator to your right will take you to the executive floor. Someone will meet you there." I thanked him and moved toward the elevator, aware of his curious gaze following me. It was a small but satisfying moment, that shift from dismissive to respectful, when he realized who I was meeting. The executive floor was a hive of activity. Men and women in business attire moved purposefully between glass-walled offices and conference rooms. Screens displayed real-time data and company messaging. The energy reminded me of my consulting days, that particular buzz of a successful enterprise in motion. "Virginia Thompson." A young woman approached, tablet in hand. "I'm Melissa, Miss Wilson's executive assistant. She's just finishing a call and asked me to bring you to her office. Can I get you anything while you wait?" "Coffee, water." "Water would be lovely, thank you," I replied, following her through the bustling floor. Employees glanced curiously in my direction, perhaps wondering what business this older woman had in their high-powered environment. Melissa led me to an impressive corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "Please make yourself comfortable. Miss Wilson will be with you shortly." Left alone, I took in the office details. Awards and recognitions lined one wall. Family photos sat on a credenza behind a substantial desk. A bookshelf held business texts, interspersed with volumes on leadership and innovation. It was the office of someone who had achieved remarkable success while maintaining personal connections. Virginia Thompson. I cannot believe my eyes. I turned to see Catherine Wilson entering the office, arms outstretched in greeting. She was in her early 50s now, elegant and polished with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to leadership. But her smile held the same warmth I remembered from the eager intern 3 decades earlier. "Catherine, how wonderful to see you after all these years," I replied, accepting her embrace. She stepped back, hands still clasping mine, and shook her head in amazement. "When I saw your email yesterday, I nearly fell out of my chair. Virginia Thompson, You were the reason I stayed in consulting when that horrible senior partner tried to push me out. Do you remember? I smiled, the memory returning clearly. Harold Blackwell. He made that summer associate cry every week. I told him if he couldn't provide constructive feedback, he should let me handle the interns. Catherine laughed. You were the only person who stood up to him. You showed me what real leadership looks like. She gestured toward comfortable seating by the windows. Please sit. We have so much to catch up on. For the next 30 minutes, we reminisced about Peterson and Wallace and shared highlights of our respective journeys since then. I explained my decision to leave consulting after pregnancy complications, the international relocations with Frank's career, and my extensive community leadership work. So, that's how you have a son working here, Catherine said, making the connection. James Thompson in operations is your son. I nodded. Yes, though I didn't mention that in my email, because I wanted this conversation to be about my qualifications, not family connections. Completely understandable, she agreed, and your qualifications are impressive, Virginia. The combination of high-level corporate experience and extensive community leadership is exactly what we're looking for in new board members. Our company has grown so quickly that we need governance expertise to match our operational success. She reached for a tablet on the coffee table between us. I took the liberty of sharing your resume with our board chair last night. He was equally impressed and authorized me to discuss specifics with you today. The conversation shifted to Synerg Tech's strategic priorities, challenges, and board expectations. Catherine asked insightful questions about my experience with governance, crisis management, and community engagement. I provided thoughtful responses, drawing on concrete examples from both my corporate and nonprofit work. This is remarkable timing, Catherine said eventually. We have our quarterly leadership meeting tomorrow morning. All vice presidents and directors gathered to discuss departmental progress and strategic alignment. Would you be willing to attend? It would give you insight into our operations and give our leadership team a chance to meet you before I make a formal board recommendation. I'd be delighted, I replied, though my heart quickened at the thought of James's reaction. Excellent. Let me show you around the facility while you're here. Catherine led me on a tour of several floors, introducing me to department heads and key personnel. Everyone was welcoming and professional, though I noticed curious glances exchanged after introductions. Clearly, potential board members weren't routinely given personal tours by the CEO. We ended at a conference room, where 3 people were reviewing presentations on a large screen. Catherine introduced them as the Chief Financial Officer, Chief Technology Officer, and General Counsel, all of whom greeted me with evident interest. Virginia has an impressive background in both corporate consulting and community leadership, Catherine told them. She's considering joining our board as part of the expansion initiative. We could certainly use your perspective, the CFO commented, especially with our new corporate responsibility programs. We chatted briefly about current initiatives before Catherine escorted me back to the elevator. I've already discussed compensation and commitments with the board chair, she said, handing me a folder. This outlines the details. The position comes with standard director compensation, including stock options, and approximately 10 hours of commitment monthly between meetings and committee work. I glanced at the numbers in the folder and managed not to show my surprise. The compensation was substantial, far more than I'd earned for my nonprofit board leadership. I'd like to announce your appointment at tomorrow's leadership meeting, if you're comfortable proceeding. Catherine continued. The board chair has given provisional approval, pending a formal vote next week, but that's essentially a formality at this point. That seems rather quick, I observed, though pleased by her confidence in me. Catherine smiled. When you find the right person, why wait? Besides, I've followed your career through alumni networks over the years. Your reputation is sterling. She checked her watch. The meeting starts at 9 tomorrow. Can you join us? Absolutely, I agreed, mentally preparing for what promised to be an interesting morning. As I drove home, emotions swirled through me. Excitement about this unexpected opportunity, satisfaction at being valued for my experience and abilities. And yes, anticipation about James witnessing this validation of the mother he had so casually dismissed. "How did it go?" Frank asked when I arrived home. "They've offered me a board position," I replied, still somewhat amazed by the swift progression of events. "Catherine is announcing it at tomorrow's leadership meeting." "The one James will attend," Frank said, understanding immediately. "Are you going to warn him?" I considered the question carefully. "No," I finally decided. "This isn't about embarrassing James. It's about him seeing me as I truly am, not just as his mother. Sometimes truth needs to arrive unfiltered." Frank nodded slowly. "He's in for quite an education tomorrow." I spent that evening reviewing Synerg Tech's materials and preparing for the morning meeting. As I laid out another business outfit for the morning, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. I was genuinely excited about this professional opportunity that aligned so well with my skills and experience. But I couldn't deny the element of vindication I felt about James witnessing this public recognition of my capabilities. Whatever happened tomorrow would change our relationship permanently. I hoped the change would ultimately bring greater understanding and respect between us, though I knew the path might not be smooth. The next morning dawned clear and bright. I dressed with care in a charcoal gray suit, with a burgundy blouse, professional but not severe. As I fastened a silver necklace Frank had given me for our 30th anniversary, I considered what lay ahead. In a few hours, my son would be forced to reconcile his dismissive view of me with a very different reality. The thought brought both anticipation and anxiety. "You look ready for battle," Frank observed, adjusting my collar affectionately. "Not battle," I corrected. "Recognition." I arrived at Synerg Tech headquarters 30 minutes early, giving myself time to collect my thoughts before the leadership meeting. The security guard from yesterday greeted me by name, no condescension in his tone today. "Good morning, Miss Thompson. Miss Wilson asked that you be escorted directly to the executive boardroom when you arrived. Emily from her office is coming down now." Within minutes, Emily appeared and led me to a large conference room on the executive floor. Catherine was already there reviewing presentation materials with 2 colleagues. "Virginia, perfect timing," she said warmly. "I was just finalizing the agenda. Your introduction will come after my quarterly overview. Is that all right with you?" Of course, I agreed, taking the seat she indicated near the head of the table. "Most of the leadership team knows we've been seeking additional board members, with your specific background," Catherine explained. "But they don't yet know we've found our perfect candidate." Over the next 15 minutes, the room filled with approximately 30 executives and senior managers. I observed their interactions, noting the company culture reflected in casual greetings and pre-meeting conversations. No one questioned my presence, assuming perhaps that I was a consultant or advisor of some kind. At 8:58, a familiar figure hurried through the door, attention focused on materials in his hand. James took a seat midway down the table, nodding to colleagues, but not looking toward the front where Catherine and I were seated. He hadn't seen me yet. Precisely at 9, Catherine called the meeting to order. She began with company performance highlights, departmental recognitions, and strategic priorities for the coming quarter. James contributed briefly during the operations segment, presenting confidently on supply chain optimizations. Before we continue with departmental reports, Catherine said after 45 minutes, I have an exciting announcement regarding our board expansion initiative." James glanced up from his notes, his expression showing polite interest, but nothing more. He still hadn't noticed me, partially obscured as I was by others seated between us. "As you know, our board has been seeking new members with specific expertise to guide our next growth phase," Catherine continued. "I'm delighted to announce that we've secured an exceptional addition who brings both high-level corporate experience and extensive community leadership credentials." She gestured toward me, and heads turned in my direction. "Please join me in welcoming Virginia Thompson to our board of directors." I maintained a composed expression as James finally saw me. His eyes widened in shock color draining from his face. His mouth opened slightly, but no words emerged. Catherine continued. "Virginia was previously a senior consultant at Peterson and Wallace, where she managed organizational restructuring for multiple Fortune 500 clients. Her work increased operational efficiency by an average of 22% while maintaining workforce stability, quite an achievement in the corporate landscape of that era." James stared, unblinkingly frozen in his seat, as Catherine outlined my professional background. "More recently," she continued, "Virginia has served as board chair for Memorial Hospital System, where she led a governance restructuring that improved patient outcomes and financial performance simultaneously. She also developed the Community Crisis Response Network that became a national model for disaster management, coordinating 15 public agencies and hundreds of volunteers during major emergencies." Colleagues around the table nodded appreciatively at these accomplishments. Some took notes. One woman near James leaned over and whispered something that made him flinch. Virginia's unique combination of corporate expertise and community leadership experience is precisely what Synerg Tech needs as we expand our global footprint while deepening our commitment to corporate responsibility, Catherine concluded. She'll be working closely with our community engagement and governance committees. Catherine turned to me with a warm smile. "Virginia, would you like to say a few words?" I stood my posture straight and confident. "Thank you, Catherine. I'm honored to join Synerg Tech's board at such an exciting time in the company's evolution. In my experience, the most successful organizations balance innovation with responsibility growth, with sustainability. I look forward to contributing to Synerg Tech's continued success and positive impact." Applause followed my brief remarks. As I sat down, Catherine added something that made the entire room laugh, except for James. "And in an interesting coincidence, Virginia happens to be James Thompson's mother. Looks like your mom's. The boss now, James." All eyes turned to my son, who managed a tight smile while looking as though he might be ill. Throughout the remainder of the meeting, James remained uncharacteristically silent. His usual confidence evaporated. Whenever our eyes met, he quickly looked away. When Catherine opened the floor for questions after departmental reports, several executives directed theirs to me, seeking my perspective on governance issues and community engagement strategies. I answered thoughtfully, drawing on concrete examples from my experience. With each response, I could sense growing respect from the room and growing discomfort from James. As the meeting concluded 2 hours later, Catherine announced, "Let's all welcome Virginia properly with a reception in the executive lounge immediately following this meeting." Executives approached to introduce themselves as the meeting broke up. James remained seated, seemingly unable to decide what to do next. Finally, as the room emptied, he approached me stiffly. "Mom," he said, his voice barely audible, "I didn't know you would be here today." "Surprise," I replied evenly. "I should have been informed about this," he said, a hint of accusation in his tone. I met his gaze directly. Why? Would you have tried to prevent it, or perhaps prepared a more accurate assessment of my life accomplishments? His face flushed. That's not fair. I didn't know about your background at Peterson and Wallace. You never asked James. You made assumptions about my life based on what you saw, without ever wondering what came before or what continued alongside motherhood. Catherine approached before he could respond. James, your mother is quite remarkable. Did you know she mentored me when I was just a summer intern? She stood up to the most intimidating partner in the firm to protect me and other young associates. She was legendary at Peterson and Wallace. James looked between us, clearly struggling to integrate this new information with his existing perception of me. I need to get to another meeting, he mumbled eventually, and hurried from the room. The reception that followed was pleasant, but somewhat surreal. Executives shared company stories and asked thoughtful questions about my perspective on various business challenges. Several mentioned their surprise at learning I was James's mother, noting our different management styles or communication approaches. James is very data-driven, one operations manager observed. Are you similar in your approach to problem-solving? I believe in balanced analysis, I replied diplomatically. Data matters, but so do human factors and long-term implications beyond the numbers. By noon, I had met most of Synerg Tech's senior leadership and had invitations to tour several departments on future visits. Catherine walked me to the elevator, both of us aware that James had not appeared at the reception. That was quite a revelation for your son, she remarked. I gather from his reaction that he wasn't fully aware of your professional background. James has only ever known me as his mother, I explained. Until recently, that seemed sufficient to him. Catherine nodded understanding. Well, I suspect he's seeing you with new eyes today. And speaking of new perspectives, the board chair is thrilled you've accepted our offer. The formal vote is next Tuesday, but it's unanimous based on my preliminary conversations. We said our goodbyes with promises to speak soon about onboarding details. As I drove home, I reflected on the morning's events. I had achieved what I'd set out to do, establish my professional identity and capabilities in James's workplace. But his reaction left me with mixed emotions. The shock and discomfort on his face had been evident to everyone present. While part of me felt vindicated, another part worried about the damage to our relationship. Frank was waiting eagerly when I arrived home. How did it go? How did James react? About as expected, I replied, recounting the meeting details. He was completely shocked. He avoided me after the initial announcement and disappeared before the reception. Frank shook his head. He'll need time to process this. His entire perception of you has been upended. I know, I sighed. I just hope we can find our way to a better understanding after the dust settles. The phone remained silent that evening and the following day. James, who typically called several times a week to discuss everything from stock options to football scores, had gone completely quiet. I knew he needed space to reconcile what he had learned about me with his previous assumptions. I could only hope that when he was ready to talk, we could begin building a more authentic relationship based on truth rather than comfortable illusions. 2 weeks passed without a word from James. During that time, I attended my first official Synerg Tech board meeting, following the formal vote confirming my appointment. The other board members were welcoming and receptive to my perspectives, particularly regarding community engagement initiatives and governance best practices. Catherine made a point of introducing me to key stakeholders, highlighting my unique combination of corporate and nonprofit experience. I found myself thoroughly engaged in the company's challenges and opportunities, offering insights drawn from both my consulting background and community leadership roles. Your suggestion about restructuring the community grant program is brilliant. The head of corporate social responsibility told me after one meeting. The impact metrics you proposed will give us much better data about actual outcomes. Despite my professional satisfaction, James's continued silence weighed heavily on my heart. Frank assured me our son would eventually come around, but as days stretched into weeks, I wondered if our relationship had suffered permanent damage. Then unexpectedly I received a text message from Allison James's girlfriend. "Virginia, I want to apologize for what happened at dinner. James was completely out of line. For what it's worth, I was incredibly impressed when Catherine announced your board appointment. Would you be willing to meet for coffee sometime? I'd love to learn from your experience." I replied warmly, suggesting a coffee shop midway between our locations. 2 days later, we sat across from each other at a small table, initial awkwardness giving way to genuine conversation. "I had no idea about your background," Allison admitted. "James always just referred to you as being a stay-at-home mom." "That's because it's the only role he ever saw me in," I explained. "Children often struggle to imagine their parents as complete people with lives and identities beyond parenthood." Allison nodded. "Still, what he said at dinner was inexcusable. I've told him as much repeatedly." "How is he doing?" I asked, unable to keep the maternal concern from my voice. She hesitated. "Honestly, he's a mess. Embarrassed, confused, angry, guilty, all cycling through. The office has been buzzing about James's mom on the board since the announcement. Some people are teasing him. Others are genuinely impressed by your credentials. He doesn't know how to handle any of it." "I never intended to embarrass him," I said truthfully. "I just couldn't accept his dismissal of my life and contributions." "You shouldn't have to," Allison agreed firmly. "What you did took courage. Actually, it's one reason I wanted to meet with you. I'm at a point in my career where I'm considering future family planning, but worried about losing professional ground. Seeing someone who navigated both worlds successfully, even in different seasons of life, is inspiring." Our coffee extended to lunch as we discussed career paths, work-life integration, and the evolving landscape for women in business. By the time we parted, I had agreed to an informal mentoring relationship with Allison, regardless of her future with James. "I'll tell him we met," she promised. "Maybe it will help him take the next step." 3 days later, my phone rang with James's number on the screen. My heart raced as I answered. "Hello, James." "Mom," his voice sounded strained. "I was wondering if you might be available for lunch tomorrow. Just the two of us." "I'd like that," I replied, keeping my tone neutral despite the flood of relief I felt. "Where would you like to meet?" He suggested an upscale restaurant equidistant from our home's neutral territory where we could talk privately. We agreed on a time, and the call ended without further conversation. The following day, I arrived at the restaurant 5 minutes early, selecting a quiet corner table. James arrived precisely on time, looking more uncertain than I had seen him since his teenage years. He wore a business suit, but had loosened his tie as if caught between professional composure and personal discomfort. "Thank you for meeting me," he began after we ordered. His fingers fidgeted with his water glass, betraying his nervousness. "Of course," I replied. "I've missed our conversations." He looked up, genuine surprise in his eyes. Even after what I said, "You're my son, James. That doesn't change because you hurt me." He winced at my direct acknowledgement of the hurt. "I'm sorry, Mom. What I said at dinner was inexcusable. I was arrogant and dismissive, and I deeply regret it." "Thank you for that," I said simply. "But I still don't understand," he continued, frustration creeping into his voice. Why didn't you ever tell me about your career at Peterson and Wallace? Why keep that part of your life hidden from me?" "I didn't hide it, James. I mentioned it occasionally when you were growing up, but you showed no interest. Children naturally focus on their parents' roles in their own lives. You saw me as mom, not as Virginia Thompson, with a history and identity separate from motherhood." He considered this brow furrowed. "But joining Synerg Tech's board without telling me feels deliberately calculated to embarrass me professionally." I took a slow breath. "That wasn't my primary motivation, though I won't deny there was an element of wanting you to see me clearly. When Catherine's name appeared on that recommendation letter, it felt like an opportunity to reclaim a part of myself that had been dismissed not just by you, but sometimes by me as well." Our food arrived, creating a natural pause in the difficult conversation. After the server departed, I continued. "The board position is a perfect fit for my experience and interests, James. I didn't pursue it to teach you a lesson, though, that became a factor after our dinner conversation. I pursued it because I'm qualified and have valuable contributions to make." He nodded, slowly cutting his steak without eating it. "Catherine speaks about you like you're some kind of corporate legend. She said you were her most important mentor. Catherine was an exceptionally promising intern during a time when women in consulting were still rarities," I explained. "I recognized her potential and tried to provide the support I wished I'd had early in my career." "And now she's my boss's boss," James said, with a hint of his old humor. "Life has interesting circles sometimes." He finally took a bite of his meal, chewing thoughtfully. "Allison says I needed my perspective completely shattered. She thinks I've been carrying unconscious bias about working versus stay-at-home mothers." "What do you think?" I asked gently. James set down his fork. "I think I never bothered to see you as a complete person. I defined you solely by your relationship to me, without considering your history, your choices, your sacrifices, or your ongoing contributions outside the home." His voice grew strained. "I'm deeply ashamed of that now. We often fail to see the complete humanity in those closest to us," I offered. "We freeze people in the roles they play in our lives, forgetting they have their own full stories. Still, I should have known better. I should have asked questions, shown interest." "Yes, you should have." I agreed, not softening the truth. "But now you have an opportunity to start seeing me more fully, just as I need to continue seeing you as the man you're becoming, not just as my son." He met my eyes directly for the first time. "I've been learning about your community work since the board announcement. Your disaster response program saved lives during the River Valley flooding. The literacy initiative you developed has helped thousands of children. Why didn't I know about any of this?" "You never asked, James. And I perhaps too easily accepted being defined solely as your mother and Frank's wife. That was my responsibility, not just yours." We continued talking through lunch, James asking questions about my early career, my decision to focus on family, and my community leadership work. For perhaps the first time, he was genuinely curious about my life beyond motherhood. "What was hardest about leaving your career?" he asked, as we waited for coffee. "Losing part of my identity," I answered honestly. In the corporate world, I was valued for my intelligence, strategic thinking, and leadership abilities. As a mother, especially in those early years, success was measured in much less visible ways. There were times I questioned my choice, times I felt invisible. "But you don't regret it?" I considered the question carefully. "I regret that our society makes it so difficult to maintain both career and family, forcing painful choices. But no, I don't regret prioritizing you and supporting Frank's career during those years. I do regret not maintaining a clearer sense of my own identity and making sure you understood the full scope of who I am." James nodded slowly. "I've learned more about you in the past 2 weeks than in my entire life. Did you know people at Synerg Tech are actually asking for transfers to projects where they might work with you?" This surprised me. "Really? Really? Allison says the marketing team is hoping you'll consult on their community engagement campaign. And my team?" He hesitated. "Your team. My team has suggested that I might learn some valuable management approaches from you," he admitted with a rueful smile. "Apparently your collaborative leadership style is considered more effective than my data-driven approach." I laughed softly. "Perhaps we could learn from each other. Your analytical skills are impressive, and I've always admired your technological aptitude." As we finished our coffee, James asked hesitantly, "Would you be willing to have dinner again with Allison? A proper do-over of that disastrous evening." "I'd like that very much," I replied warmly. "And maybe sometime if you're willing. I'd like to hear more about your Peterson and Wallace days, the real stories, not the sanitized versions." "I have quite a few that might surprise you," I promised. We parted with a genuine hug, the first step in rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of greater truth and mutual respect. As I drove home, I reflected on how completely our dynamic had shifted in just a few weeks. James was beginning to see me as a whole person with a lifetime of experiences and contributions, not just as his mother. And I was allowing myself to reclaim parts of my identity I had too easily set aside. The road ahead would require continued honest conversation and adjustment on both our parts. But for the first time in many years, I felt fully seen by my son, not just as his mother, though that would always be a cherished role, but as Virginia Thompson, a woman of substance, accomplishment, and worth. 6 months have passed since that difficult family dinner when James dismissed me as just a housewife. In that short time, so much has changed in our family dynamics and in my own sense of identity. Last night we gathered for another family dinner, this time to celebrate my successful implementation of Synerg Tech's new community engagement framework. James and Allison arrived, carrying flowers and wine, their easy affection for each other, evident in small gestures and shared glances. The board presentation was phenomenal. Mom James said, as he helped set the table, a task he would have previously left entirely to me. "The CEO of Harbor Medical can't stop talking about how your approach will transform their community outreach. The metrics you designed are brilliant," Allison added. "We're already seeing improved engagement across all demographics." Frank beamed with pride as he carved the roast occasionally, adding his own observations about my contributions to Synerg Tech's evolving corporate responsibility initiatives. Throughout dinner, the conversation flowed naturally between family matters and professional topics, a seamless integration that would have been impossible half a year ago. This new chapter of my life has been unexpectedly rewarding. My board position at Synerg Tech requires approximately 12 hours monthly for formal meetings and committee work, but I've found myself engaged in additional consulting projects that leverage both my corporate background, community leadership experience. The mental stimulation and professional recognition have awakened parts of me that had been dormant for years. At 67, I've discovered a renewed sense of purpose and identity beyond family roles. Not replacing those precious connections, but expanding alongside them to create a more complete expression of who I am. The most meaningful change, however, has been in my relationship with James. After our reconciliation lunch, he began asking thoughtful questions about my earlier career and community work, genuinely interested in understanding the fullness of my life experience. We've had several conversations that have revealed aspects of each other we never previously explored. I never knew you were the first woman to lead a restructuring project for an automotive company, he remarked during one such discussion. That must have been incredibly challenging in the 1980s. It was, I acknowledged. I had to prove myself repeatedly in ways male colleagues never did, but it taught me valuable lessons about resilience and authentic leadership. Is that why you focus so much on inclusive decision-making processes, he asked, making connections between my past experiences and current approaches? These conversations have created bridges between us, transforming our relationship from the limited mother-son dynamic to a richer connection between two adults who respect each other's journeys and perspectives. James has begun introducing me to his colleagues with evident pride. This is my mother, Virginia Thompson, he told a group at a recent corporate function. Before she joined our board, she was transforming organizations while I was still learning to walk. Frank has watched this evolution with quiet satisfaction. I've always known who you are, he told me recently. But it brings me joy to see you fully recognized, especially by James. My relationship with Allison has also deepened in unexpected ways. Our initial coffee meeting evolved into regular mentoring sessions where we discuss career strategy, work-life integration, and leadership approaches. Last month, she was promoted to Senior Director of Global Marketing, and she credited our conversations as instrumental in helping her navigate organizational dynamics. You've shown me that careers aren't linear, she explained. There are seasons for different priorities, and success can be defined in multiple ways. The pain of James's dismissive words at that fateful dinner has faded, replaced by appreciation for the growth that difficult moment ultimately triggered. Had he not wounded me so deeply with his careless judgment, I might never have reclaimed important aspects of my identity and professional capacity. This journey has taught me several profound lessons. First, we must never allow others to define our worth based on their limited perception of our contributions. Whether paid or unpaid, visible or behind the scenes, every form of meaningful work deserves recognition and respect. Second, even the most painful confrontations can lead to transformation when approached with honesty and openness to growth. James's harsh words became the catalyst for a necessary reassessment of how we saw each other and ourselves. Third, it's never too late to reclaim dormant parts of your identity or to pursue new avenues for contribution. At 67, I've embarked on an unexpected professional chapter that brings fulfillment and impact I never anticipated at this stage of life. Perhaps most importantly, I've learned that authentic relationships require seeing beyond roles to the complete humanity of those we love. James now knows me as Virginia, the strategic thinker Virginia, the community leader Virginia, the mentor as well as mom. This fuller vision has deepened rather than diminished our connection. Last week, during a board meeting discussion about multi-generational perspectives, Catherine made an observation that resonated deeply. The most dangerous assumption in any organization is that we fully understand the capabilities and contributions of each person. Everyone has hidden depths, unexpected skills, and untold stories that might transform our collective work if only we bothered to discover them. I glanced at James across the conference table and saw him nodding in agreement, our shared understanding reflected in his smile. As I look toward the future, I feel a profound sense of gratitude for this unexpected late-life evolution. Not just for the professional recognition and engagement, though those are deeply satisfying, but for the more authentic relationships that have emerged from the painful process of being truly seen. We all desire to be fully known and valued for our complete selves, not just for the roles we play in others' lives. Sometimes, achieving that recognition requires courage to challenge comfortable assumptions and stand firmly in our truth, even when doing so disrupts established patterns. The journey from just a housewife to respected board member wasn't really about professional titles or external validation. It was about reclaiming the fullness of my identity and insisting on being seen completely by my son and by myself. What about you? Is there someone in your life you've reduced to a single role, missing the richness of their complete story? Or perhaps you've allowed others to define you in limited ways that don't reflect your full capabilities and contributions. I hope my story inspires you to look deeper, ask meaningful questions, and recognize the hidden depths in yourself and those around you. If this resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for more life stories and give this video a thumbs up. I'd truly love to hear about your own experiences with being fully seen and valued for who you truly are. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, it's never too late to redefine how the world sees you or how you see yourself.